Welcome. Grover Norquist here with Americans for Tax Reform. This is the Leave Us Alone podcast. Topic today is school choice, the school choice revolution. The whole idea of the Leave Us Alone coalition is that the center-right in America is a collection of groups and individuals that what they want from government is not other people's money or other people's approval or other people's attention. They want to be left alone. And you certainly see that in the Second Amendment community and taxpayers and businessmen and women, religious liberty. And one of the places we see it changing elections, changing states, changing the world is in the debate over school choice and allowing parents to have the choice of where to send their kids to school, whether it's homeschooling, religious schooling, private schools, choice within the public school system. Big changes taking place. And we have with us today a man who's making this happen. DeAngelis is a senior fellow at the American Federation of Children. That's the group out there. Lots of groups are doing many good things at the state level. American Federation for Children is one of the key ones. He's a senior fellow there, and he's an executive director of the Educational Freedom Institute and an adjunct scholar at the Cato Institute. He's very active in school choice and a senior fellow at the Reason Foundation. Reason's been a longtime champion of the issue of school choice and serves on the board of the Liberty Justice Center. I want to take just half a moment here and encourage everyone to subscribe to this podcast. If you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or leave a five-star review. Then everybody can see it and join us in the future. And if you're watching this on live stream, please be sure to hit the thumbs up on YouTube and subscribe to the Americans for Tax Reform YouTube channel or like us on Facebook. Okay, with that part of the workday over, I want to look at school choice. And Corey, let me tell you my favorite anecdote and then ask you why. 1983, Newt Gingrich brought 30 Republican congressmen out to Maryland, and we spent a weekend. That wasn't a congressman, I was a guy who helped out. And all these congressmen were there, and they were divided into tables, and they were to think of something interesting. And some said flat tax, gold standard, a whole Zazip, because it was pizzazz backwards. I mean, we were out there with ideas here. And one table said school vouchers. And a very prominent conservative Republican who you would know, who was a congressman, stood up and said, if you're going to talk about school choice, about vouchers, I'm going to have to leave the room. 1983, leader of the modern conservative movement, terrified that anyone would say he was in the room when school choice was being discussed. Now, when I walk through the halls of state legislators, the default position in talking to Republicans is that they support very expansive school choice. Corey, what brought you to this fight? And then how did it unfold? How did we get to where you can stay in the room when somebody mentioned school choice?
Yeah, totally. Before we move on, you did mention 1983. Well, there's a 40-year anniversary coming out of a report that came out that year in 1983, April, the Nation at Risk report. And it's I have a book coming out with Connor Boyack from Libertas called Mediocrity, as a reference to that Nation at Risk report, 40 Ways Government Schools Are Failing Today's Students. It comes out on the 40th anniversary of the Nation at Risk report, which will be April 26th. Coming out next month pretty soon. So grab a copy. It's available for Amazon for pre-order. But yeah, I got into this fight because I actually benefited from school choice growing up in San Antonio, Texas. I went to government-run schools all through K through 12. In high school, though, I was able to go to something called a magnet school, still run by the government, but you're not assigned to it. So it doesn't have strong monopoly power. They are public schools of choice. And I felt like that was a good benefit for me. And I feel like other families should have similar opportunities, but it shouldn't be limited to schools that are run by the government. You should be able to take your child's education dollars to a private school, a charter school, or even to a home-based education option at the same time. After that, I did a PhD in education policy, which is where I really got thrust into the national conversation and the University of Arkansas. I was an education policy PhD in the Department of Education Reform. And my first study there linked the Milwaukee private school choice program, which started in 1990. We used student level data from the state longitudinal evaluation and looked, by the time the students became about 25 to 30 years of age, able to access their individual criminal records after adjusting for differences in demographics and household characteristics. My co-author, Patrick Wolf, and I at the University of Arkansas found large reductions in the likelihood of crime by the time the students were 25 to 30 years of age as a result of being exposed to that parental choice program in Milwaukee. So it's an outcome that not a lot of people have looked at. There have been 6 peer-reviewed studies on that topic. I've done 2 of them with Patrick Wolf. All 6 of them, all peer-reviewed, all find large reductions in the likelihood of crime, which I would say is arguably more important to parents in the long run than anything that could be captured on a standardized test. Most of the studies, however, look at standardized test scores because that's the most readily data that's available. And so that kind of got me into this from a researcher standpoint. And then when I was looking into going into academia, I started to figure out that my peers in the peer review process were more so my enemies than anything else. Most of the people in the education departments are close to Marxists. And so you don't get really a fair shake. Despite that, I have published about 40 peer-reviewed journal articles. It was an uphill battle, though. And I decided to go somewhere that I would be rewarded for my ideas as opposed to punished. So I went into think tanks, Cato Institute, Reason, and now I'm at the American Federation for Children, where we are having a lot of victories all across the country with the latest school choice revolution, partially because of our work, but also because of teachers unions and their bosses like Randy Weingarten, who have overplayed their hand over the past couple of years and awakened a sleeping giant, a new special interest, the parents who just want more of a say in their kids' education.
I debated Randy Weingarten once or twice, I think, on one of those morning C-SPAN shows. And back a ways, the line from the heads of the unions, the teachers unions, oh, we like charter schools. They weren't crazy about private charter schools. They like public charter schools. They just didn't like those private schools. Charter schools, okay. Private schools, not okay. In the recent election, it's my understanding that in 2020, anyone who got support from the teachers union was required to swear on something or other that they would defund. No federal funds would be allowed to flow to charter schools. That they were done pretending they liked charter schools. Right. Is that accurate?
That's right. I mean, yeah, the Democratic Party in particular has been controlled by the teachers unions even more so recently. With Randy Weingarten's union, the American Federation of Teachers, in the most recent election cycle, according to Open Secrets, 99.97% of their campaign contributions have gone to Democrats. And so they've taken a hard stance against any form of choice and competition, whether that's charter schools or private school choice. I mean, I think that they've historically been more accepting of charter schools before, perhaps because these schools can be regulated by the government. They can't be religious. They can't charge tuition, and perhaps it was less of a competition for the traditional public schools because they're less likely to be very different and specialized relative to the government-run schools. But private schools opens another level of competition that they haven't been comfortable with. But either way, the charter schools or the private schools, they're not typically staffed by teachers unions. And so that's the main issue there. And so you have a lot of opposition, most recently with the Biden administration trying to use a rulemaking process to regulate the teachers unions who own their competition, the charter schools.
Could you give us a sense of the arc? Back in 1986, homeschooling was legal in 2 states and not legal, often go to jail in 48. That's a little more than 40 years ago. That's a long time to, just about 40 years ago, a long time to from go to jail to legal in 50 states. The marijuana people haven't been able to do that. That's a huge step forward. What happened with vouchers? How did they come about? How far did we get so far from nobody has choice in the sense of allowing your tax dollars to come back with your child to go to school they want, to where, where we aren't yet, which is everybody has complete control of their education?
Yeah, totally. So the first voucher programs were actually in Maine and Vermont, something called town tuitioning programs that started in the late 1800s, specifically for students who lived in rural areas that didn't even have public schools. So they were giving vouchers to families in rural areas to attend a public school in another area or even a private school, which is funny because a lot of the arguments you're hearing today to try to stem off school choice in red states is that, oh, well, we can't do it here, even though they do it over there because we have rural areas here. And that means that gives us a check and we don't have to vote for our party platform issue. But some of the oldest voucher programs were specifically for kids in rural areas. So this can benefit students in rural areas. And before I move on, I have to hit that these same politicians will say, on the one hand, we can't do it in rural areas, or I'm not going to vote for this because my constituents don't benefit from school choice. They can't use the voucher because there's not a lot of private schools. Maybe they'll even say the public school is the only option in my area. But then in the next breath, with a straight face, they will somehow be able to say that this will defund and decimate our great rural public schools. Well, if it's true that they're great, they won't be decimated. They'll be fine. And then two, well, you can't have it both ways. If you don't have any exit options, your schools definitely won't be decimated. So you should be the last person arguing that this will defund your public schools. If it's true that your area has the fewest exit options, you should be the last person voting against this. It's more of an excuse they try to conjure up to side with the establishment and to go against their party platform issue. But since the late 1800s, the first modern day voucher program was actually in Milwaukee, the parental choice program in 1990. And since then, up until a few years ago, we were making incremental progress, and we had private school choice programs in 30 states. So the majority of states plus DC already had private school choice programs, either in the form of voucher, tax credit, scholarship, or education savings account. And the thing is, though, with over those 3 decades or so, it was incremental reforms. It was typically targeted to students who are at the lowest of income levels, or capped at a certain number of students. I think in DC, the average household income using that program is about $30,000 per household in DC. And in Florida, their tax credit scholarship program, their average household income, I want to say, was about $40,000 in Florida. So these were typically very targeted to low income and also targeted to students who had a special need. But over the past couple of years, we've kind of had the wind at our backs. Instead of going with these incremental inching forward reforms that take decades and decades to expand, politicians are now understanding that we fund education for everybody at the K-12 level already in our state. Why not have that same funding follow the student as opposed to the system? We don't income cap public schools. We don't say because you have this income level, you can't go to a public school. Why would we income cap having the money follow the child to a private school? It doesn't make any sense. So, and it's also because as I alluded to, the teachers unions overplayed their hand in pushing to keep the schools closed. It allowed parents to see what was happening in the classroom. And so parents who weren't just from lower income levels, middle income families too, started to see that even if their kid was assigned to a school that was A-rated by the state, maybe they thought it was a great school because of the standardized test scores, started to see something else going on, which was another dimension of school quality that's arguably more important to parents, which is whether the school's curriculum aligned with their values. And as Vodi Bakum once said, we cannot continue to send our children to Caesar for their education and be surprised when they come home as Romans. Well, the good news is parents aren't surprised anymore. So they're pushing back at school board meetings. They're pushing back at the ballot box. We're doing really well with elections. It's become politically advantageous to support parental rights in education, and it has become a form of political suicide to come out against parental rights in education. Terry McAuliffe in Virginia learned that all too well when he said, I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach at the final debate stage. Glenn Youngkin won by 6 points with education voters in particular, in a state that went 10 points to Biden just the year before. And that was the number 2 issue on the election. But now the states are going all in. I mean, we have 6 states in the past 2 years alone that have gone universal, meaning all families eligible regardless of income and regardless of background or zip code.
What are the 6?
The 6 states, the first one was West Virginia in 2021. Second was Arizona in 2022. And then we've had 4 states go universal in 2023. We can now claim this to be the year of education choice. It's the biggest wins we've seen in any single year. And we're not even done with the year yet. It's only March. But we had Iowa, Utah, Arkansas, and now Florida. Governor DeSantis signing into law the biggest universal bill of the year, because Florida is just a bigger state than the others. If you add up the number of students in the other 5 states, it's about the same amount. It's about 3 million students at the K-12 level in West Virginia, Arizona, and the others, relative to Florida having about a little under 3 million students. So in one fell swoop, Florida just doubled the number of students eligible for a universal school choice program in the country. So this is a huge win. And the way that I've put it before is the dominoes are falling. We've reached escape velocity with school choice. We've gone from inching along to just racking up victories left and right in red states in particular. It's become a GOP litmus test issue. And in the midterms, look, we didn't have a red wave or a blue wave, but there was a school choice wave. 76% of the candidates supported by my organization, the American Federation for Children, won their races in 2022. And you don't have to take my word for it. You can look at the liberal tiers in the New Yorker magazine when the author lamented that education freedom candidates fared depressingly well in the midterms. And also you can look at the article that came out from NBC News yesterday. They were trying to fearmonger about a Betsy DeVos-backed group, the American Federation for Children, racking up wins on school choice all across the country. It was meant to be a hit piece, but it read as a fantastic endorsement of the work that my organization is doing all across the country. Talked about the seismic victories that we're seeing. And it's funny that they tried to point out how much money we spent in the elections, but then they didn't point out any of the money that was spent in opposition. Why did they not do that? Because our opposition has a lot more money than us, and yet we're still beating them. That just goes to show you how popular school choice is among voters across party lines. Real Clear Opinion Research polling most recently finding 72% of Americans supporting school choice, with supermajority support among Republicans, Democrats, and independents. It's no wonder NBC didn't want to ask or even dig into how much the teachers unions spend. They have a war chest to defend the monopoly, and they're part of the status quo. It's easier to defend something that is the status quo than to change, to have a policy that changes things in the K-12 education system.
Governor Reynolds of Iowa said that she had 3 bites at the apple, started with the small, just handicapped, then just poor people, then everybody. But before the last vote, which passed, school choice education savings accounts for everyone in Iowa, she went after and primaried 9 Republicans who had been voting against school choice opportunities for children in their districts in Iowa, and that 8 of the 9 were defeated. And when she first met after this, the gentleman who she had primaried unsuccessfully, he ran up and said, I'm Team Reynolds, I'm Team Reynolds. So the idea that rural areas are actually representing their own people, that they're that they're actually representing their own constituents, as opposed to doing what the teachers union wanted them to, really was showed that Iowa was nonsense.
That's right. And we took out, or Reynolds and our group and parents pushing back at the polls took out the chair of the House Education Committee. So you had someone in leadership position, an incumbent, Dustin Haidt, got soundly defeated. I think it was like one of those, 69, 70-30 vote, just absolute destruction of an incumbent who came out against school choice and who was funded by the teachers union as a Republican. That should be the political kiss of death for any Republican moving forward. This is a line in the sand issue, much like other issues for the GOP, because families, it's about parental rights. Families should be able to direct their own children's education.
Yes, you'd think so. Georgia, what happened in Georgia, and what moves forward now?
Hopefully Georgia is a blessing in disguise, just like we saw with Iowa. So last year, Iowa Republicans in the House, even though they controlled 60% of the seats, could not get it done, even though Governor Reynolds had already passed the Senate with all Republicans except for one who voted in favor, overwhelmingly passed their Senate. Governor Reynolds held the legislature past the 100th day and advocated for the policy very heavily. And it didn't happen, even though they had 60% of the chamber. But that bill was much more targeted. I think it was only like 2,000 students or something. It was income capped. It wasn't going all in on school choice. Well, that loss turned into a blessing in disguise because we got some real Republicans in office in Iowa, and they passed universal school choice, the first state to do it this year, the third state in the country to do it. So that's a win that came out of a loss. And perhaps in Georgia, something similar will happen. So just the other night, it was their sine die, the last day they needed to pass something. Their Senate passed a bill, education savings account, school choice bill, through a party line vote, 33-23, a couple weeks ago. And all Republicans voted in favor. They came out, voted for their party platform issue and got the job done. I will say, though, it was amended down to only the students who are in the 25% lowest performing schools. I would rather have it be for everybody, but hey, this is meant to be a compromise, to be, if you didn't want to go with full-throated support for universal, perhaps we can get a quarter of the students eligible, the ones who are in the worst schools. They got it done in the Senate, moved over to the House. They put it up for a vote a couple days ago, the last day of session, and it failed on an 85-89 vote. You need 91 votes to get it done, and we were 6 votes short. The speaker didn't vote in that 85 vote. He would have probably voted in favor if he was the final vote. So we're probably only down like 5 votes. But that meant, with the makeup of the Georgia House, 16 so-called Republicans voted against a party platform issue of school choice and sided with the establishment. And you should have heard, I was watching it all day, the floor debate. When that vote happened, the audio stream had the Democrats just screaming with joy in support of the bill going down in flames, because the teachers unions were happy, obviously, and they were basically cheering on those 16 Republicans who voted against school choice. So, hey, look, 84 Republicans voted in favor. There was actually one Democrat that voted in favor too, Misha Maynor, who is a strong advocate for school choice. It shouldn't be a partisan issue. Both parties should support it. But look, we'll see what happens with elections coming up next year. I think a lot of people are upset about 16 so-called Georgia Republicans voting to kill school choice, just as every other state's doing. I mean, Governor DeSantis had just signed his universal bill into law, and a lot of these other states are engaging in friendly competition to support families. I mean, I live in Texas. The Senate Education Committee just passed their universal bill 10-2 with all Republicans in favor. The 2 Democrats who voted against it in Texas attended private schools themselves, which is just glorious. It always happens. It's always this hypocrisy. Joe Biden went to private school and sent his kids to private school, but he doesn't support school choice for others. You see this all over the place, but there's a lot of momentum. And yeah, there's every once in a while we're seeing a loss, but look, although the unions blocked it in Georgia for now, they may have won the battle. They will not win the war. This is a policy that has reached escape velocity. It's super popular. States are engaging in friendly competition, and families have woken up.
Any more states expected to have a vote this year? And what does one look forward to next year?
Yeah, so Oklahoma, they just had a vote a couple days ago this week. Their House passed a universal school choice bill, 75-25, 3-1 vote. Bam, that's how Republicans should get it done. And then this this week, moved over to the Senate. Senate amended it down to if you made $250,000 or less, that's pretty good. It's not universal, but that's pretty dang good to go from not having a program to 250,000 income level. That's the majority of the families will be eligible. It's a good step in the right direction. And their Senate passed it 40-7. I want to say all Republicans in favor and the Democrats opposed. So that's huge margins. They got to do a committee, a conference thing now to where they hash out perhaps they raise that income cap higher. Perhaps the House gets more of what they want than what the Senate passed. We'll see how that goes. But it looks like it's almost certain that Oklahoma will
one more. Done. Any others you're looking at this year?
Yeah, Texas, Nebraska. So Tennessee just passed an expansion to add another county to their ESA program. That passed both chambers. Nebraska is funny because they have a unicameral. You need a 2/3 majority in the filibuster, and they finally got it this year. They've always passed it pretty consistently with majority support, but they got the super majority support on the first vote this year. They need to pass it 2 more times, which I don't see why they want to be able to repeat.
They have Lou Ann Linehan there, and so I think that makes it all possible. In Texas, are the votes there, or is there a bottleneck in one of the committees at this point?
The votes are there in the Senate. And look, Texas passed a universal ESA before it was cool to do so in 2017. Their Senate passed it 18-12 or something. Yeah. And they had the votes in the Senate. I mean, look, they passed it party line 10-2 through the committee. I expect a vote this coming next week in the full Senate. That'll give it extra momentum. The House has historically been a problem. In 2017, they blocked it. And the thing is, it isn't 2017 anymore. I mean, Texas Republican primary voters responded on the ballot last year. 88% supported school choice, up from 79% in 2018. So that's a 9 percentage point jump in support. Families are paying close attention now. I think there wasn't a lot of hubbub about the failure in 2017. The world will turn upside down if the House kills school choice this year, but I don't think they're going to. I mean, Abbott has been campaigning all across the state, doing these parental empowerment nights. I was just at a rally with him in Austin. He is really pushing hard to get it done, and I haven't seen this kind of leadership anywhere. So typically you get 2 out of the 3, one chamber in the governor's office, you can get something done. And the sense at the Capitol is that something is going to get passed. I hope it's universal, but we'll just see how it plays out. This will be the crown jewel of the school choice victories. We just talked about Florida being a big win. Texas will be even bigger. It's over 5 million students who would have access to private school choice.
How can people get involved and work with you?
You can follow me on Twitter. It's at DeAngelis Corey, but also you can, if you want to help us in the fight for education freedom, you can sign the Education Freedom Pledge. It's just educationfreedompledge.com. And the name of your book again? Mediocrity, 40 Ways Government Schools Are Failing Today's Students comes out. It's already out for pre-order on Amazon, but it's also comes out officially April 26th, next month. Basically this month, if you're watching this tomorrow, April 26th, it's the 40-year anniversary of the Nation at Risk report.
Okay, wonderful. Final thoughts here. The parents movement, the parental rights movement, the school choice movement are key parts of the Leave Us Alone coalition. If you go around the table, who's sitting there saying, leave me alone? You've got people are concerned about their ability to practice their faith and transmit it to their children, the Second Amendment community, taxpayers, small businessmen and women, independent contractors, vapors who'd like to be able to save their own lives without the government getting in the way, and parents who want to homeschool. What are your best numbers, Corey, on the jump in homeschooling since we had this situation, since COVID? I get very cheerful but conflicting numbers, up from 3 million.
Yeah, I mean, the latest data that I saw from the Census Bureau indicated roughly a doubling of the homeschool population. But, it's a survey, and it's a pretty legitimate survey. It's the U.S. Census Bureau, and they had a huge sample. So it's just kind of hard to tell. But I would say about a doubling. Some students probably went back, some didn't. So we got to wait for more data.
3 million kids in charter schools. They're now more parents of children in charter schools than there are public school teachers in New York City. So when the other team wants to do the little calculation about where the votes are, charter schools alone of all the choices can outvote the teachers union itself. Not out-contribute perhaps, but outvote. Corey, thank you for your leadership on this. It's been a long trip. It's not over, but one can see increasing votes in the future. And in running Americans for Tax Reform, we often look at how people leave high tax states and move to low tax states, from to the 14% in New York City down to 0 in Miami on income taxes, city and state. Imagine what happens when you add to going from 10% income tax to 0 as you move from California and New York into the rest of the country without income taxes, state income taxes. Add to that $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 per child allowed to get to you to begin to move to the school of your choice. Young parents with families will begin to leave the blue states, not just wait until they start to make some.
I just did it. I moved from DC to Texas, no state income tax, and we're about to get school choice done.
Excellent, Corey. You have started a wave there. Thank you very, very much, folks, and have a good day. Take care. Grover Norquist here.